I now call to order the regular meeting of the Fairfield Planning Commission of August 25th, 2021. Mr. Feinstein, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Werblin?
Present.
Commissioner Smith?
Present.
Here. Commissioner Evans? Commissioner Evans is not here. Commissioner Cruzen?
Here.
Commissioner Childs is absent this evening. And Commissioner Matthews?
Present. Commissioner Smith, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Not a problem.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Information on speaking at tonight's meeting. There are speaker cards in the lobby area that must be filled out by anyone, including the applicant, if you'd like to speak on any item. Speakers may address items on this agenda at the time each item is considered. Please pass the card up to us prior to the time for public comments on the item. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the commission. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There aren't.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
A second.
The motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor, please indicate with show of hands. Okay, next is the approval of the minutes for July 28, 2021, Planning Commission. Are there any changes to the minutes?
Not from staff.
May I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I move to approve the July 28th minutes.
And a second?
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please indicate by the raise of hand. Okay. Public comments. This is a time for the public to speak on items not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Items from the public that items from the public that are not part of the agenda will be taken under consideration without discussion or action by the commission, except as authorized by law, and may be referred to staff. I will now open the public comment period. Are there any speaker cards?
There are no speaker cards.
And any, I guess we're not doing emails?
Yeah, we are no longer doing by email.
Failing any public comment, I will close the public comment period. Scheduled matters. The next item on the agenda is a scheduled matter. For each agendized item, there will be a presentation by city staff. For items that involve applicant requests, I will then ask the applicant to address the Planning Commission if they so desire. Then I will open the public hearing and call out names of members of the public who have filled out speaker cards to come forward to the podium to speak for up to 3 minutes. Staff will then read any email comments received during the meeting. I will close the public hearing after all comments have been provided and after all of our questions regarding the testimony during the public hearing have been answered. After the public hearing is closed, the Planning Commission will deliberate on the items and may have additional questions of staff. We cannot take additional testimony or questions from the public after the hearing is closed. The Commission will then vote on the item. Our first item is item A, a public hearing on the request by June Lee, HPA Architects, to construct approximately 204,000 square foot light industrial distribution building. The staff member presenting is Brian Miller.
And before Brian begins, I do want to note that at your seat here, just before the meeting, we received a letter regarding the environmental analysis for the project. We'll talk about that briefly when we get to that point in Brian's presentation.
Okay. Thank you, members of the commission. As the title suggested, this is for an industrial project in the Bush Corporate Commons Industrial Park between Low Court and Guittard Way. If you're familiar with the Sutter Medical Campus, it is located on the vacant parcel immediately south of Sutter and immediately north, of course, of Guittard Chocolate. It's 205,000 plus or minus square feet, flexible industrial building. It's suitable for warehouse and distribution uses or light manufacturing. There are no specific tenants or tenant identified at this time. There are a large number of truck stops that would be suitable for distribution or warehousing business. One unusual element of the project is that it will require the extension of the existing Guittard Way cul-de-sac to the rear boundary of the property. Basic site plan. I might point out some of the benefits of the site plan. It is a standard industrial building like we're seeing in this general vicinity. They have, however, tucked away the truck parking area, I might note, to the side, so it is not really that visible from Chadbourne Road, which I think is a nice design element. Otherwise, from a site planning standpoint, it meets the zoning ordinance requirements in our code and our standards. Again, a basic industrial building. However, I might point out they do use quite a few interesting architectural elements in the building, including pop-outs, variations in material, some color band, quite a bit of glass. And it's, for an industrial building of its type, it's a very attractive specimen, and staff fully supports the architecture behind it at this time. Landscaping, the project meets all of our landscaping requirements. It provides landscaping especially along the frontage of Chadbourne Road, but also the cul-de-sacs as well. General plan and zoning, as one might expect, this is an industrially designated site with light industrial zoning, as is true of the rest of the Bush Corporate Park. Just to briefly review the general plan and zoning consistency, this land use is consistent with the limited industrial general plan and the IL, limited industrial zoning classification. The project's in a developed business park near similar or compatible office and industrial uses. And generally speaking, our general plan, of course, encourages employment-generating uses near major freeway corridors such as Interstate 80 and, in this case, Highway 12. So it basically meets the intent of the general plan and the zoning ordinance for projects of this type. Development review, we are asking for development review approval tonight. It is consistent with applicable standards, as I mentioned, and as your staff report goes into more detail on. I'm already noted the color accents and pop-outs that break up the design of a very large structure, as well as the building orientation and the landscaping. Environmental review, as I mentioned, we did receive a letter challenging our environmental review, and the planning manager, Dave Feinstein, was going to review that with you now.
Yeah, we're not going to go through it in any detail. It just came in. It's a law firm that we engage with some frequency who submitted this. What I will say is that staff prepared the environmental analysis that was included with your report. It covers all the items that we are required by law to address, and in staff's opinion, fully addresses all of those issues as required by law. So we are perfectly comfortable with the environmental review, despite any comments that might be in that letter. And so our recommendation, and Brian will get to the full recommendation, would be to consider the environmental review that you have in front of you to be fully correct and adequate.
Yeah.
With that, Brian, you can go ahead and talk about
All right.
the analysis.
As mentioned, we did do an initial study for the project. There were it was a complete initial study that looked at all the different environmental issues that could potentially affect a project like this, such as biological resources, air quality, stormwater, water quality just in general, and as well as some unusual ones that are under California CEQA law right now, including special archaeological and cultural resource issues, et cetera. So we looked at all those issues in the initial study. We did identify some potential impact categories which needed a little additional look at, so to speak. Air quality and construction activity inevitably creates, to build the building, inevitably creates some air quality impacts. So we have standard construction quality mitigation requirements that we impose on all larger projects like this that address those impacts to less than significant. Archaeological and cultural resources, there's some standard protocols that we're beginning to integrate, or have been integrating, I should say, into all of our projects where there might be buried Indian remains or cultural remains. We do communicate with the Yohadihi, and they provided us some recommendations as to how to meet those requirements, and we have incorporated that into the mitigated neg deck. A new wrinkle, of course, in our CEQA review is the vehicle miles traveled. And the applicant's consultant did look at the issue in the context of the overall development pattern of the city, the overall likely development in the future in the city, and recommended certain mitigation measures to reduce the relatively minor but still legally significant impacts under VMT, and we're satisfied with that analysis at this time. As mentioned, the mitigation measures for all these impacts reduce the impacts to less than significant under state law. That's a pretty simple report for a large building, but as I mentioned, staff is very happy with the project overall, and at this time, we'd like to recommend the Planning Commission approve the mitigated negative declaration and the development review approval for the Fairfield Industrial Project. Thank you, and I can answer any questions.
Do the commissioners have questions for Mr. Miller?
Chair Matthews, I do have a question.
Please go ahead.
So in reviewing this, it looks like the space occupancy, 204,000 square feet, and the parcel is 11 acres. So this building isn't taking up all of that acreage. So is it about, I don't know, 30, 40% of
And-
that land? And does that mean that that's just going to be unused? Or is there a plan for this applicant to further build on that land? Are we sacrificing that since this building is not taking up the space?
Not at all, actually. Excuse me. The zoning ordinance does have certain standards as to how much lot coverage you can have. So they can't really go to 100% lot coverage in this zoning district. But if you look at the site plan, a lot of the site is not necessarily taken up by the building itself, but by truck parking, landscaping, circulation, et cetera. So this is a fully developed site in the context of our industrial areas.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple, Brian. So it looks as if the way the parking lines are structured, that there'll be truck parking nearest to Guttered Way.
Correct.
And I see the landscaping looks pretty robust in that area, but that can be, an eyesore, seeing a bunch of large trucks parked there. Do you have confidence that that landscaping will visually be enough of a buffer?
It will provide a screen, but bear in mind that this is not a place where a lot of trucks are necessarily going to be stored. Many times the trucks will actually be in the tucked away area near the delivery doors. We were especially more interested in screening the view of the trucks from the main through street where most of the traffic is, namely Chadbourne Road.
Right.
And the orientation of the building and the extra landscaping in that corner, I think, does screen the trucks. But yes, you are going to see them, whether every space is going to be semi-permanently or frequently occupied by trucks. That's not the way most of these distribution businesses work. If you go along Cordelia Road, for example, not every truck parking space is completely full in those large glass bottle warehouses. So we're pretty happy with it.
Yeah, and one of the things that you can see on this landscape plan that you don't typically see is a double row of trees
Yeah.
up there at the corner, and then along Guittard
Yeah.
Way. Those trees are doubled in there, so it will provide a substantial thickness to that canopy to screen the trees.
Was there a consultant report for a traffic study, or was it just done?
Yes. Yes, especially with the VMT analysis, all larger projects like this are going to have a consultant report.
And did that report address the type of traffic? The concern being, especially with Sutter, they have urgent care, more pedestrian-type use, not pedestrian, but consumer-type use going on there, trying to navigate traffic in and amongst a bunch of huge semi-trucks.
Well, it did to a certain extent. The focus of the consultant report is overall traffic volumes and the VMT issue, which we're now required by the state to address.
Yeah.
But I might point out in looking at the staff report, a lot of the Sutter traffic is going to come off of Low Court. And the truck traffic for this project is not going to go off of Low Court. It's going to go off of Guittard. That's
But there'll still be Chadbourne.
somewhat,
Some,
yeah.
yeah.
But not necessarily, but most of the traffic going to Sutter, I would argue, is coming from the 12 side.
Yeah,
So
I'd
by the
agree.
time the Sutter traffic distributes out into the Sutter campus, sure, there's some conflict for that short period, but a lot of the truck traffic going further down Chadbourne, there's not going to be much conflict with Sutter traffic.
yeah. And by and large, what I know of that neighborhood, it's consistent with the other uses there.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but Brian did point out one thing I do want to highlight. One thing that staff looks at, we're always looking at conflicts between different uses. The applicant presented to us very early on their design, and we discussed with them making sure that the truck bays and the truck docks were all on the Guittard side, which
Right.
faces another industrial user rather than
Yeah.
the medical office. We're always looking to make sure that we're trying to minimize those conflicts as much as possible.
Right.
And they did a good job of doing that here.
Okay, so, point of clarification, do we discuss the attorney letter now or afterwards during deliberation?
So there's really not a whole lot to discuss. We took a quick look at it, not in depth, but our city attorney looked at it, we looked at it, and again, we remain fully confident that if you approve the environmental review tonight, it is a fully legally valid document. It addresses the issues exactly the way the state wants us to, and that with confidence you can take action on that document tonight.
And I might mention, because we have several new commissioners, in prior developments, we have had similar last-minute letters from various legal firms making similar claims on other projects. So this is not anomalous to what we've seen in the past. All right, so, please.
My question is kind of two-part question. One, I know that you don't have the proposed project doesn't have a tenant yet. Do they plan on doing multiple? It's open to one tenant or various tenants for this?
That has not been defined. The representative from Trammell Crow, who's here today, can perhaps address that issue. This is a fairly flexible floor plan. It could be taken by one large distribution business, or it could be split into a couple, three. I'm guessing because of the configuration of it, and Mr. Little can confirm that it might be leased to a single operator, but that doesn't have to be.
Okay. And then going back to the traffic concerns, I take that road sometimes when it's traffic as a back road for me. And my concern is if we have a lot of ongoing trucks, would that be an issue? Could you clarify more on what the third-party company had said in regards to some of the traffic concern, and then also the road as well too, just driving through there and adding more trucks to it? Are we, as a city, going to repair that?
The number of trucks, daily truck traffic added to this was not considered a significant impact by the consultant's report. Or the letter you received tonight might disagree, or certain people might disagree, but this is an industrial area that's going to have uses like this, and the amount of truck traffic that's associated with this kind of building is not going to be beyond that. Chadbourn's a 4-lane road,
Yeah.
and has very quick access to Highway 12, so it's a good location for this kind of semi-truck heavy land use. They're not going to be trundling through residential areas or heavy commercial areas. It's direct access to Highway 12 and I-80. So it's a good place, actually, in our opinion, a good place to put truck traffic.
Yeah, the road network that was developed in this area was designed specifically to support all of the industrial parcels out here, and we've got the Solano Business Park directly across the street. So when it was laid out and designed by the city, it was intended specifically to be able to handle the volume of truck traffic and industrial traffic that you would likely see out of this area.
So my added concern was just the state of the road. If you guys have driven through there, it's not that good. And as we have more residents and more businesses in Fairfield, I see that road being more congested, especially during high traffic times. Would we address, I don't know, I'm just concerned about the road, how it is now, and if that's going to add more.
Are you
and just the back
asking?
roads itself?
Are you asking about the condition of the road surface
Correct.
itself,
With an added-
the asphalt?
Correct.
Okay. We don't necessarily address that during entitlement of projects, but what we can do is we can take that comment, we can pass that on to our Public Works Department, that, it's been highlighted that the condition of the road itself is not as good as we might like, and to take a look at that. We do have maintenance programs for our roads, and so I can certainly pass that on to our Public Works crew to take a look at.
And my understanding is some of the roads in this industrial park are, so to speak, in the queue for future repaving. We have someone here from the Transportation Division. I don't know if he can speak to that directly, but I'll ask Garland to comment on that.
Yeah, my name is Garland Wong. I'm the city's traffic engineer. I know we worked on, as part of public works, we worked on repaving and resurfacing the roads just like 2 or 3 years ago in that area. And so I think all the striping, all the markings are pretty fresh. And Public Works does do frequent monitoring of the roadways to make sure if there's distresses in the roadways that they address those through a program where they can.
Yeah, with respect, I do agree with Commissioner Cruzen's comment that that road needs maintenance, but it's really outside the purview of this commission, though that's why we passed Measure P.
That's correct.
And hopefully some of the new auto dealerships down the road from this will help in support of the funding for that. Okay, with that, if there are no more questions, we'll open the public hearing. Do the commissioners have any more questions for Mr. Miller, please?
I'm just curious, and I don't know if this is for you, Mr. Miller, or for the applicant. I'm just looking at their aesthetic and the landscaping design. Is there any pedestrian walkways in that area, looking at that construction? So for example, in some of the other buildings, they incorporate that for the employees to use. Just thinking kind of like of our Fairfield 2050 and beautifying our city.
I know it's kind of at a small scale. It's a large parcel, so it's the map plan on the screen is at a small scale. But yes, there are sidewalk improvements.
Were you asking about like a walkway break area for employees?
Correct. And just depending upon if it's adjacent to other buildings, not like a break room, but just to be able to go outside, walk the block, the court, et cetera.
Yeah, so I see the sidewalk, but
Yeah.
I don't see anything else.
Well, there's, of course, the landscaping area in front of the office, right at the end of the low court cul-de-sac. There's also an area here that could also be potentially used for that as well.
And just a follow-up, I meant specifically intentionally created for that purpose, not just necessarily the walkway, the entrance that comes with every building. Does that make sense? Thank you.
We didn't specifically mandate any employee outdoor recreation areas. That's not something we often see in industrial buildings of this type.
Yeah, there's a sidewalk and a cycling network throughout the industrial area there, so if folks want to go for a walk, they can certainly utilize or ride their bike. But on the site itself, as Brian mentioned, it's typically not something that we do to mandate exercise areas on that parcel itself.
Thank you.
Okay, I now open the public hearing. We have one card from the applicant, I believe. Mr. Little, please come forward.
Thank you. Just be a little more first person. Thank you for your time. I just have a few brief remarks, but I wanted to start off with, I'm Don Little with Trammell Crow Company. I very much want to introduce my teammates that are here tonight. Will Parker with Trammell Crow, Lena Pan with Trammell Crow, Curtis Tubbs, and our rock star, Teresa Goodwin, who's the Northern California Director for HPA Architects. We're all available for questions that may come up as we proceed. Brief comments. Clearly, we're pleased to be here. This is our first investment in Fairfield. And praise where praise is due. We have been delighted with the experience we've had with staff in terms of their communications, in terms of their clarity of direction. And maybe you think it's just, you take it for granted as a normal offering, but your conceptual review process is wonderful. And it sets you apart from many, many jurisdictions around Northern California and the Bay Area itself. We've got 3 departments, detailed feedback, curbs, gutters, everything, landscape, traffic, you name it. And so when we made our initial submittal to the city, to the planning department, we were so much further along. So we're grateful for that. It improved the outcome for the city, I think, and it certainly made us more efficient coming in. Trammell Crow has a 70-year legacy. I haven't been there for all of that, but it's an institutional brand. I'm not going to tell you about how big we are, but it's a substantial company. And we do very high quality, best in class, institutional grade, if you will, buildings. So I think you'll be pleased with the quality of the development that we intend to bring forward here. And with that, I'll stand back, and we're available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Mr. Little, why don't you remain there, and we'll pepper you with a few questions. First, do the commissioners have questions for the applicant?
I do have a question. I know, I feel like I keep picking on this, but I know you don't have a tenant in mind, but what's an ideal tenant for your company that you're looking for to bring to the city of Fairfield?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's my own hearing, but
I'm so sorry. I know that I keep picking this topic. I know that Brian stated that there's no tenant in mind, but if I could just pick your brain, what's an ideal tenant for you to bring to the city of Fairfield?
What kind of tenant do you think you'll
forgive me,
get?
and it's just the masking, and it's part of what we all do right now, so thank you.
Yeah.
The easiest answer and the lawful answer is we have to abide by the permitted uses with the city zoning. And so it will be light industrial. It could be distribution warehousing. It could be assembly. It could be a number of things. These buildings are often, you see them heavily populated with trucks and traffic and so forth. And those parking lines down by Guittard, that's for trailers. So when trucks are moving, that can happen. That's the most intense use that you might imagine coming out of a building like this. But often it's, this building is designed to take up to 4 different tenants by just dividing it in sections from front to back. And we think that we're going to have a very much of a two-pronged demand from kind of local existing operators in this proximity or the city itself, and or some from the Bay Area that just can't find a home. So it's somewhat of a generalized answer, but it's intentionally designed to be flexible. Mm-hmm. So.
Thank you.
Other questions? So first of all, I do have a couple comments as well. Others are thinking. Thank you for your comments about our staff. We love and appreciate them, and I have every confidence they're doing a great job for the city, and are pleased to hear that you feel the same way. Mm-hmm. Secondly, in my career, I've dealt with Trammell Crow in various different markets, and I can validate the fact that they are a world-class organization with decades of experience, and I'm surprised you haven't done a development in Fairfield, but very pleased that you are now, and hope that you'll have more coming. Following up to Commissioner Cruzen's question, there's a lot of new industrial coming on board. Mm-hmm. What are your marketing approaches? And even though you may not be able to name specific tenants, can you give us a little more insight as to why you're confident putting up, a 200,000 square foot building, you'll find the tenants you need?
See how I can best address that. It's very much timing is a factor. So here we sit here today before you. We still need to do construction drawings and get building permits, and then we have to build a building. So we're a year and a half or so before the building's even ready to be occupied. During that period of time, other buildings that are on the market we expect to be leased. The velocity of demand driven by e-commerce and other light industrial uses, and just the pure raw scarcity of available space to grow. Absorption is just, it's remarkable. So we're not really concerned about any inventory that might be there in front of us today. We think when we get there, there's going to be a need for even more than what we're bringing forward. So we're comfortable with that proposition. Again, as it relates to our profile of a tenant, if you will, When we come to communities to say, is it going to be Amazon? We're not building this imagining Amazon, but you could get an e-commerce type operator, and that business is somewhat complex where the monster buildings out in the inner reaches, and it steps down from huge to moderate, and then a building like this could be what they call a last mile building. So the product might come in at night and come out in the gray Sprinter vans, if you will, to your home the next day. That kind of e-commerce we could imagine. But there's a lot of local manufacturing companies and sort of legacy companies along the 80 corridor and even down 680. They're getting pushed out by just the fierce competition and really, really sharp increases in rent. So I think we're going to see legacy, more traditional industrial manufacturing operating companies migrating up the 80 corridor. We think this would be a very suitable spot for that. I don't know what more I can say, yeah.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant? Please.
Yeah, it looks like there's a more than adequate amount of parking spots for, at least in comparison to requirements. So I know some of those are the larger trucks, and then I imagine, it looks like the majority of the parking spaces could be for employees. Do you have an idea of roughly how many jobs or what kind of economic impact? And this may be for staff, but just wanted to see what store there.
That's, the parking ratio, and Teresa, we're basically, 170 spots? 150-ish? Forgive me. And so that's an easy extrapolation to say if you can park there, you can work there. But what we're seeing because of alternate modes of transit, bikes, we've agreed to a traffic demand management program that will allow for alternative methods of travel. The parking lot count itself is not a limiting factor as a result, but I don't want to do pie in the sky either, but 200 or 300 perhaps jobs in that space, but it can range, it can vary.
Which I might notice typical for some of the more industrial buildings that we're seeing in the city.
Yeah, I did see that there's a bus stop on the Chadbourne side, adjacent on the east side of this building. I don't know how many percentage of people would be coming on the city bus, but I just figured I'd ask, what the ballpark is for jobs.
Our traffic engineer kind of makes my head spin when they try to explain the metrics behind figuring that out. But I think if you build it, they will come, and I don't think they'll all come by car. So,
yeah. The goal with the new VMT emphasis is to encourage that kind of alternative transportation, traffic, as he mentioned, traffic demand management. You're going to be seeing another industrial project where that was a larger industrial project where that was even more the case as far as TDM and alternative transportation. You'll see that in the near future.
So I don't know that it's a current regulation, but will you be adding EV car charging stations?
Yes.
Is that part of?
Yes.
How many, do you know?
I'm going to put Teresa on the spot to guess. I can't recite that off the top.
It seems to me like I saw something that in the future, there's going to be a state mandate for 10%. Do you know?
Yeah.
I heard that number, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. At your last meeting, you requested an update and an overview on EV, so we're working with our Public Works Department to get that for you sometime in the early fall. So we'll give you a whole overview of that.
Right.
We used to look at that as an imposition. Now we look at it as an amenity.
Yeah.
And things have changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
If I could, and at my own peril, I do want to make a brief, very limited point of information about the letter that came in late today.
Please.
It's a law firm we're very familiar with. It's an environmental claim on behalf of citizens. And just as an adult, to be candid, it's a front for special interest to try to exact financial consideration from the project. Pure and simple. I know all the parties involved. As unflattering as that sounds, we are in active negotiations with them, and those things typically get resolved in that fashion. But I just want to make sure you understood what it was in fact. And so with that, I'll stop speaking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see no further speaker cards. Are there any emails that
Nope.
have come in?
Nothing else has come in?
So we're ready to close the public hearing. I now close the public hearing. Now is the time for deliberation. What comments, concerns do the commission members have?
Yeah, I think other than the parking spots, it seems like if it is such a large building, I was a little bit skeptical of how many sort of work employee parking spots there are, but other than that, I think the design is as mentioned, there are actually more trees and provide a little more covering, and the way that the site is laid out does minimize, the impact of, kind of the aesthetic impact on Chadbourne, so I think I'm generally supportive.
I think that they did a good job addressing some of my issues, or all of our issues, and it makes sense. It's an industrial area. I couldn't see any other building. I'm just curious, what was the other, because I like to see both sides. What was the concerns from the...
Say again.
I'm sorry, I like to explore both sides, so I was just curious if we could briefly talk about what the third party or the other party was talking about in this letter. What were some of the concerns? Is that possible that we could share that?
Yeah, we haven't had a chance to read it in detail, so I can't, I don't know, if city attorney may be able to.
Sure. Questions should be addressed generally during the public hearing, so that the commission can take into consideration any information.
Should I
becomes-
reopen?
Well, sure, as a formality, although I'll just address this very briefly. I'll just summarize the points of the letter. The letter is addressing the initial study, mitigated negative declaration, and it goes through making points in areas that it believes that the environmental analysis was deficient or didn't comply with CEQA. So it goes through a couple of the different impact areas and makes an argument. And as Mr. Feinstein mentioned, staff prepared the environmental analysis, went through the different impact areas in the initial study, and reached the conclusion based on their analysis that all impacts were reduced to less than significant levels. So it's...
Thank you.
So may I make this comment that the risk to the city that we approve this project, the applicant goes forward, and then it gets tied up in legal litigation, which would potentially cause delays. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
So if in fact the applicant is successful in reaching a settlement, financial or otherwise, for this letter to be withdrawn, that is one avenue of solution. The other is, a potential delay of the project. But with respect to the city, I don't perceive that the city is being put at risk, unless I'm misstating it.
We would agree, we would concur with that. And I might point out that the process for challenging the mitigated neg deck would be, the first step would be an appeal to city council. So
Okay.
that's the first step, but not necessarily, and
So if the planning commission were to approve this project and the attorney firm and their client disagreed, there is no settlement, then their next step would be to go to city council.
right.
Yes, so they have a next level of remedy above that if they're still not satisfied. Yep.
Before going to litigation.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay? Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Well, I will just reiterate my comment that we've got a first-class developer. This is in a site designed for this purpose. I know with other activities in the marketplace, there's a tremendous amount of interest. One other point that I was in another meeting where they were discussing, there'll be $800 million spent on the I-80, 680 interchange in the next 10 years or so, and that's going to also be a very influential aspect of more businesses coming this way. So personally, I'm supportive of this, and if there's no further discussion, would like to ask for a motion.
I motion to approve.
Now, do we need to reference anything with the letter
No,
in the motion?
no, I don't believe so. No, you can,
So we do need to call out the
the resolution number.
resolution number.
2021-18.
So I motion to approve resolution, which one again? Sorry.
2021-18.
2021-18.
Second.
The motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor, please signify with a raised hand. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes.
Motion passes, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, thank you to the applicant and your team, and we look forward to seeing more of these coming along. Okay, we're now moving into item 8, Director's Report. Mr. Feinstein.
Yeah, several items to report to you tonight. So the first is, as you'll recall at your last meeting, Chuck Wood resigned from the commission. So what that means is we do have a vacancy, and the city is currently soliciting applications from members of the public, citizens of Fairfield, who are interested in sitting up here at the Planning Commission. And the application period is running through the end of the day on September 10th, it looks like. So, yes, September 10th is the deadline. If anyone who's watching, or if you know somebody who's interested, you can go onto the city's Planning Commission page on the city's website, and you can download the application, or you can contact our city clerk, Amber Alexander, at 707-428-7402, and she can provide you with a copy of the application form. So that's 428-7402, Amber Alexander, if you're interested. If you have questions about being on the Planning Commission, anyone can call me, Dave Feinstein, the Planning Division Manager, and I'm at 707-428-7448. So, looks like somewhere probably late September into October, and more likely probably October, before we have that empty chair filled up here at our Planning Commission. A couple other items, as I think you all know, several of the commissioners up here are new. This is your first year. Several are, it's your second year, and we're going to get another person who is likely to be a new planning commissioner. So there's a lot of things that you can that are probably important for you to know and understand, and we've given you some basic overview along the way. But we think because of how many of you are going to be relatively new, it would be good for a little bit of training. So in the fall, staff and the city attorney will come back probably in October, maybe in through November, with a few training sessions as a part of your meetings, just to introduce you to a collection of things that we think are important for you to know and be able to digest, so that you can be as successful as possible as planning commissioners. The final thing I want to mention is our next meeting, which is the second Wednesday in September. I don't have that date, but the 8th, yeah, I knew it was early. I'm like, that's too early. But no, it's, I guess the first is a Wednesday. So the second meeting, or the second Wednesday of the month is the 8th. At that meeting, we are going to have what we call a scoping meeting for the general plan environmental impact report. So as you're all aware, The city right now is working on preparing an updated general plan. As a part of preparing the updated general plan, we do a very detailed environmental analysis of the impacts of building out the city through the life of that general plan and looking at all the various issues, the same kinds of issues we look at for an industrial building like this, but on a much greater scale and at much more detail. So we'll actually be preparing a full environmental impact report. As a part of that, what we want to do at the very earliest stage, and we're just at the very start, is to solicit from members of the Planning Commission, as well as members of the public, input as to what are your concerns about the environment, what are things that you want to make sure we address as a part of that environmental impact report. So that will be the focus of our next meeting. And so we'll be looking for any comments from you during the public hearing, if any members of the public have concerns or things that they want to see addressed. Up front, we'll make sure to do that. We'll give you a presentation about environmental impact reports so that you get a feel for what that's going to, what that process will look like, what an environmental impact report will cover, all of those things. So you can almost look at that as the start of your education on environmental impact reports. You'll get that at your next meeting. We provided for you at your chair here what we call the notice of preparation for the environmental impact report. And that is our message to essentially to the community, telling them, here's what's going to get addressed as a part of the environmental impact report, or that we're going to be doing an environmental impact report, and soliciting those comments. So the comment period will run for another week or so after the Planning Commission meeting. So if you have things otherwise that you don't bring up at your next meeting, you'll have a little bit of time afterwards to get in touch with us. So that's my report tonight.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Mr. Feinstein, can you confirm, are these special, for the, going back to the training, since there's so many new commissioners, is that special meetings or actually during the Planning Commission meetings?
It would be during the Planning Commission. It would probably be at the end of the meeting, be what we call a study session, where we go deeper into certain issues for you.
Thank you.
Why don't you also give a briefing on the training by the state, usually in March, isn't it? Do let the commissioners know about that?
Oh, sure, yeah. Do you want me to talk about that right now?
Just mention it.
Sure, yeah, okay. So in March, what used to be called the League of California Cities, I think they're called Cal Cities now, which is an organization of essentially all the cities in the state working towards better local government, puts on a conference for planning commissioners. And Chairperson Matthews, I think you've attended at least one of those, probably right before the pandemic started. I think it was
the virtual one last year.
And then the virtual one last year, yeah, where they have a number of sessions, both training to help you be better commissioners on a lot of different topics, but also sessions talking about all kinds of issues of interest that within the state that tend to come up at your planning commission meetings. So cannabis issues, housing issues, environmental issues. So there'll be special presentations and discussions on that. And so in March, we'll be doing that. And usually around the first of the year, I get the information from Cal Cities about that, and I'll pass that on to you. We typically, if the conference is in Central or Southern California, we'll pay for a selection of you. Typically, it's not all of you due to budget reasons, but we'll pay for a selection of you to travel, stay at a hotel. One or more staff usually goes along with you, so I've attended multiple of these with the Planning Commission. This coming March, I believe it's in San Ramon, so I don't know that we'd be paying for you to stay in San Ramon because it's just over the bridge, but I believe that's where it is this year. So in any case. Yeah, it was virtual. Yeah, this year, everything I've seen suggests that it's going to be in person, but, you know, with the Delta variant or whatever the next variant is, who knows? Who knows? We're hoping it'll be in person. I think, you know, my experience having attended several conferences is, yeah, you hear the message, but it's really good being able to engage with other folks in person, and it's a better experience in my book.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to make mention that I won't be at the next meeting, but I will try to submit my comments either by the meeting or in that, did you say 1 week after the planning commission? We can
Yeah.
submit our,
If you look at the
EIR
notice of
comments.
preparation, it'll have the actual deadline for submitting those comments. It's about a week after that.
Just as a point of reference, that is Labor Day week. So that Monday is the holiday.
Yeah, this is 2 days after that.
Yeah. All right. If no further comments, we are adjourned to September 8th.
Okay.